ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपं कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरुन् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगणरघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतसावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगणललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिन्धो दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिकान्त राधाकान्त नमोऽस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी विश्वभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। मुखं करोति वाचालं पङ्गुं लङ्घयते गिरिं यत्कृपातमहं वन्दे परमानन्दमाधवम्। हरे कृष्णा।
हरे कृष्णा। तो हमने 7th चैप्टर का मार्क्स फिलोसफी के बारे में समझा था, जिसमें उनका मानना ये था कि अगर हम कैपिटलिस्ट सोसाइटी से कम्युनिस्ट सोसाइटी की तरफ मूव करेंगे तो जो डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होता है वो खत्म हो जाएगा। और जो मेन आइडिया था उनका कि सारे सिटीजन्स को स्टेट को सेंटर मानते हुए उनके लिए कार्य करना चाहिए। बट द प्रॉब्लम इज जो लीडर्स हैं वो करप्टेड है, वो अपना फायदा उठाना चाहते हैं, अपना फेवर, मतलब जो सिटीजन्स होते हैं उनका फेवर यूज करते हैं अपने प्रॉफिट के लिए। सो दैट इज द बिगेस्ट ड्रॉबैक ऑफ एनी रेवोल्यूशन जो भी आगे होगा या भी हो रहा है। तो इसका सोल्यूशन क्या है? श्रील प्रभुपाद ने बताया कि अगर कम्युनिस्ट आइडिया स्पिरिचुअलाइज हो जाए तो पॉसिबल है कि वो एक क्लासलेस सोसाइटी को एस्टेब्लिश कर पाए। तो उसके लिए हम क्या कर सकते हैं? स्टेट को रिप्लेस कर सकते हैं भगवान श्री कृष्ण से, यानी कि एज कृष्णा इन द सेंटर सारे जो सिटीजन्स हैं वो कृष्ण को सेंटर मानते हुए कार्य करें। ठीक है, फिर हम स्टार्ट करते हैं नेक्स्ट, साइको एनालिसिस एंड द सोल। तो रुचि माता जी आप स्टार्ट कर सकते हैं रीड।
Psychoanalysis and the Soul. Presenting a Vedic perspective on psychology, Srila Prabhupada discusses the subject with his disciple Syam Sundra in the following conversation, recorded in Calcutta on 5 October 5, 1971. Srila Prabhupada says, by speculating on some shock that may or may not have occurred in childhood, one will never discover the root disease. He, Freud, did not know the basic principle of spiritual understanding, which is that we are not this body, we are different from this body, and we are transmigrating from one body to another. Sham Chandra. Sigmund Freud's idea was that many psychological problems originate with traumatic experiences in childhood or infancy. His method of cure was to have the patient try to recall these painful events and analyze them. Srila Prabhupada. But he did not know that one must again become an infant. After this life, one will be Mataji, scroll. One will be put into another womb, and the same traumatic experiences will happen again. Therefore, it is the duty of the spiritual master and the parents to save the child from taking another birth. The opportunity of this human form of life is that we can understand the horrible experiences of birth, death, old age, and disease, and act so that we shall not be forced to go through the same things again. Otherwise, after death, we shall have to take birth in womb and suffer repeated miseries. Sham Sundara. Freud treated many people suffering from neurosis. For instance, suppose a man is sexually impotent. By recalling his childhood, he may remember some harmful experiences with his father or mother that caused him to be repelled by women. In this way, he can resolve the conflict and lead a normal sex life. Srila Prabhupada. However, even in the so-called normal condition, the pleasure derived from sexual intercourse is simply frustrating and insignificant. For ordinary men attached to the materialistic way of life, their only pleasure is sexual intercourse. But the Shastras, Vedic scriptures say, Yam Maithunadi Grahamedi Sukham Hi Tucham. Srimad Bhagavatam 7.9.45. The pleasures derived from sexual intercourse is 10th class at best because they have no idea of the pleasure of Krishna consciousness. The materialists regard sex as the highest pleasure. And how is it actually experienced? We have an itch, and when we scratch it, we feel some pleasure. But the after effects of sexual pleasure are abdominable. The mother has to undergo labor pains, and the father has to take responsibility for raising the children nicely and giving them an education. Of course, if one is responsible like cats and dogs, if one is irresponsible like cats and dogs, there is that is another thing. But for those who are actually gentlemen, it is not painful to bear and raise children. Certainly, therefore, everyone is avoiding children by contraceptive methods. But much better is to follow the injunction of the Shastras. Simply try to tolerate the itching sensation and avoid so much pain. This is real psychology. That itching sensation can be tolerated if one practices Krishna consciousness, then one will not be very attracted by sex life.
Next, Hetvi Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Shyam Sundar, Freud's philosophy is that people have neuroses or disorders of their total personality, various conflicts and anxieties, and that all this originate with sexual impulse. Srila Prabhupada, that we admit. An avoided living being must have hunger and he must have the sex impulse. We find that even in the animal, these impulses are there. Sham Sundar, Freud believed that the ego tries to restrain these primitive drives and that all anxieties arise from this conflict. Srila Prabhupada, our explanation is as follows. Materialistic life is no doubt very painful. As soon as one acquires a material body, he must always suffer three kinds of miseries. Miseries caused by other living beings, miseries caused by the elements, miseries caused by his own body and mind. So the whole problem is how to stop these miseries and attain permanent happiness. Unless one stops his materialistic way of life with its threefold miseries are repeated birth and death, there is no question of happiness. The whole Vedic civilization is based on how one can cure this materialistic disease. If we can cure this disease, its symptoms will automatically vanish. Fraud is simply dealing with the symptoms of the basic disease. When you have a disease, sometimes you have headaches, sometimes your leg aches, sometimes you have a pain in your stomach, and so on. But if your disease is cured, then all your symptoms disappear. That is our program. Shyam Sundar. In this theory of psychoanalysis, Freud states that by remembering and re- reevaluating emotional shocks from one childhood, we can realize the tension we are feeling now. Srila Prabhupada. But what is the guarantee that one will not get shocked again? He may cure the result of one shock, but there is no guarantee that the patient will not receive another shock. Therefore, Freud's treatment is useless. Our program is total cure, no more shocks of any kind. If one is situated in real Krishna consciousness, he can face the most severe type of adversity and remain completely undisturbed. In our Krishna consciousness moment, we are giving people this ability. Tarot tries to cure the reaction of one kind of shock, but other shock will come, one after another. This is how material nature works. If you solve one problem, another problem arises immediately. And if you solve that one, another one comes. As long as you are under the control of material nature, these repeated shocks will come. But if you become Krishna consciousness, there are no more shocks. Shyam Sundar. Rod's
Next,
idea is that the
next Manju Mataji.
Syam Sundara. Freud's idea is that the basic instinct in the human personality is the sexual drive or libido, and that if the expressions of a child's sexuality are inhibited, then his personality becomes disordered. Srila Prabhupada. Everyone has the sex appetite. This tendency is innate, but our brahmacharya system restricts a child's sex life from the earliest stages of his development and diverts his attention to Krishna consciousness. As a result, there is very little chance that he will suffer such Mataji's school. Suffer such personality disorders. In the Vedic age, the leaders of society knew that if a person engaged in unrestricted sex indulgence, then the duration of his materialistic life would increase. He would have to accept a material body birth after birth. Therefore, the Shastras enjoin that one may have sexual intercourse only if married, otherwise, it is illicit. In our Krishna consciousness society, we prohibit illicit sex, but not legal sex. In the Bhagavad Gita 7.11, Krishna says, Dharma viruddho bhuteshu kamosmi bhara, bharat Bharatar Sabha. I am sexual intercourse that is not against religious principles. This means that sex must be regulated. Everyone has a tendency to have sex unrestrictedly. And in Western countries, they are actually doing this. But according to the Vedic system, there must be restrictions. And not only must sex be restricted, but meat eating, gambling, and drinking as well. So, in our society, we have eliminated all these things, and our Western students are becoming pure devotees of Krishna. The people at The people large, however, must at least restrict these sinful activities, as explained in the Vedic Shastras. The Vedic system of Varnashram Dharma for social orders and for spiritual orders is so scientific that everything is automatically adjusted. Life becomes very peaceful, and everyone can make progress in Krishna consciousness. If the Vedic system is followed by human society, there will be no more of these mental disturbances. Shyam Sundara. Freud says that sexual energy is not only expressed in sexual intercourse, but is associated with a wide variety of pleasurable bodily sensations, such as pleasures of the mouth, like eating and sucking. Srila Prabhupada. That is confirmed in the Shastras. Yan Mathunadi Griha Griha Medhi Sukham. SB 7.9.45. The only pleasure in this material world is sex. The word Adi indicates that the basic principle is Mathun, sexual intercourse. The whole system of materialistic life revolves around the sexual pleasure. But this pleasure is like one drop of water in the desert. The desert requires an ocean of water. If you find one drop of water in a desert, you can certainly say, here is some water. But what is its value? Mataji, Similarly, there is certainly some pleasure in sex life. But what is the value of that pleasure compared to the unlimited pleasure of Krishna consciousness? It is like one drop of water in the desert. Everyone is seeking unlimited pleasure, but no one is becoming satisfied. They are having sex in so many different ways, and the young girls walking on the street are almost naked. The whole society has become degraded. Now the female population has increased everywhere, and every woman and every girl is trying to attract a man. The men take advantage of the situation. There is a saying in Bengal, when milk is available in the marketplace, what is the use of keeping a cow? So men are declining to keep a wife because sex is so cheap. They are deserting their families, and the more that men become attached to women, the more the female population of the world will increase. Shyam Sundara. How does that result in more women? Srila Prabhupada. When men have more sex, they lose the power to beget a male child. If the woman is sexually more powerful, a girl is born. And when the man is more powerful, a boy is born. This is Mataji's school. This is Ayurvedic science. For instance, in the Punjab state of India, there are fewer women because the men are very stout and strong. So when women are very easily available, the men become weak and beget female children. Sometimes they become important. If sex life is not restricted, there are so many disasters. And now we are actually seeing them. Impotency, no marriage, increased female population. But no one knows why these things are happening or how human psychology can be controlled to avoid them. For this, they must look to the perfect system of Vedic civilization.
Next, Asta Mataji.
Hare Krishna Mataji. Syamasundara, Freud says that as the child grows up, he begins to learn that by giving up immediate sensual satisfaction, he can gain a greater benefit later on. Srila Prabhupada. But even this so called greater benefit is illusory because it is still based on the principle of material pleasure. The only way to entirely give up these lower pleasures is to take to Krishna consciousness. As Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita 2.59, Paramam Drishtava Nivartate. By experiencing a higher taste, he is fixed in consciousness. And as Yamuna Acharya said, since I have been engaged in the transcendental loving service of Krishna, realizing ever new pleasure in him. Whenever I think of sex pleasure, I spit at the thought, and my lips curl in distaste. That is Krishna consciousness. Our prescription is that in the beginning of life, the child should be taught self restraint, brahmacharya, and when he is past 20, he can marry. In the beginning, he should learn how to restrain his senses. If a child is taught to become saintly, his semen rises to his brain and he is able to understand spiritual values. Wasting semen decreases. Mother, scroll. Uh, Decreases intelligence. So, from the beginning, if he is a brahmachari and does not misuse his semen, then he will become intelligent and strong and fully grown. For want of this education, everyone's brain and bodily growth are being stunted. After the boy has been trained as a brahmachari, if he still wants to enjoy sex, he may get married. But because he then has full strength of body and brain, he will immediately beget a male child. And because he has been trained from childhood to renounce materialistic enjoyment, when he is 50 years old, he can retire from household life. At that time, naturally, his firstborn child will be 25 years old, and he can take responsibility for maintaining the household. Household life is simply a license for sex life. That's all. Sex is not required, but one cannot restrain himself, is given a license to get married and have sex. This is the real program that will save society. By speculating on some shock that may or may not have occurred in childhood, one will never discover the root disease. The sex impulse, as well as the impulse to become intoxicated and to eat meat, is present from the very beginning of life. Therefore, one must restrain himself, otherwise, he will be implicated. Syamasundara. So, the Western system of bringing up children seems artificial because the parents either repress the child too severely or don't restrict him at all. Srila Prabhupada. That is not good. The Vedic system is to give the child direction for becoming Krishna conscious. There must be some repression, but our use of repression is different. We say the child must rise early in the morning, worship the deity in the temple, and chant Hare Krishna. In the beginning, force may be necessary. Otherwise, the child will not become habituated. But the idea is to divert his attention to Krishna conscious activities. Then, when he realizes he is not his body, all difficulties will disappear. As one increases his Krishna consciousness, he becomes neglectful of all these material things. So, Krishna consciousness is the prime remedy, the panacea for all diseases. Syamasundara, Freud divided the personality into three departments: the ego, the superego, and the ID. The ID is the irrational instinct for enjoyment. The ego is one's image of his own body and is the instinct for self preservation. The superego represents the moral restrictions of parents and other authorities. Srila Prabhupada, it is certainly true that everyone has some false egoism or ahankara. For example, Freud thought he was Austrian. That is false ego, identifying oneself with one's place of birth. We are giving everyone the information that this identification with a material body is ignorance. It is due to ignorance only that I think I am Indian, American, Hindu, or Muslim. This is egoism of the inferior quality. The superior egoism is I am Brahmin, I am an eternal servant of Krishna. If a child is taught this superior egoism from the beginning, then automatically his false egoism is stopped. Shyamasundara. Freud says that the ego tries to preserve the individual by organizing and controlling the irrational demands of the ID. In other words, if the ID sees something like food, it automatically demands to eat it. And the ego controls the desire in order to preserve the individual. The superego reinforces this control. So these three systems are always conflicting in the personality, Srila Prabhupada. But the basic principle is false. Since Freud has no conception of the soul existing beyond the body, he is considering the body only, therefore, he is a great fool. According to Bhagavad philosophy, anyone in the bodily concept of life, anyone who identifies this body composed of mucus, bile, and air as his self is no better than an ash. Syamasundara, then these interactions of the ID, the ego, and the superego are all bodily interactions.
Srila Prabhupada. Yes, they are all subtle bodily interactions. The mind is the first element of the subtle body. The gross senses are controlled by the mind, which is in turn controlled by the intelligence, and the intelligence is controlled by the ego. So if the ego is false, then everything is false. If I falsely identify with the body because of false ego, then anything based on this false idea is also false. This is called Maya or illusion. The whole life of Vedic education aims at getting off this false platform and coming to the real platform of spiritual knowledge called Brahma Gyan. When one comes to the knowledge that he is a spirit soul, he immediately becomes happy. All his troubles are due to the false ego, and as soon as the individual realizes his true ego, the blazing fire of material existence is immediately extinguished. These philosophers are simply describing the blazing fire, but we are trying to get him out of the burning prison house of the material world altogether. They may attempt to make him happy within the fire, but how can they be successful? He must be saved from the fire. Then he will be happy. That is the message of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. That is Lord Krishna's message in the Bhagavad Gita. Freud identifies the body with the soul. He does not know the basic principle of spiritual understanding, which is that we are not this body. We are different from this body and transmigrating from one body to another. Without this knowledge, all his theories are based on a misunderstanding. Not only Freud, but everyone in this material world is under illusion. In Bengal, a psychiatrist in the civil service was once called to evidence in a case where the murderer was pleading insanity. The civil servant examined him to discover whether he actually was insane or whether he was simply under intense stress. In the courtroom, he said, I have tested many persons and I have concluded that everyone is insane to some degree. In the present case, if the defendant is pleading insanity, then you may acquit him if you like. But as far as I know, everyone is more or less insane. And that is our conclusion as well. Anyone who identifies with his material body must be crazy, for his life is based on a misconception. Freud also investigated the problem of anxiety, which he said was produced when impulses of the ID threaten to empower the rational ego and the moral superego. Srila Prabhupada. Anxiety will continue as long as one is in the material condition. No one can be free from anxiety in conditioned life. Shyam Sundar. Is it because our desires are also frustrated? Srila Prabhupada. Yes, your desires must be frustrated because you desire something that is not permanent. Suppose I wish to live forever, but since I have accepted a material body, there is no question of living forever. Therefore, I am always anxious that death will come. I am afraid of death, and the body will be destroyed. This is the cause of all anxiety, acceptance of something impermanent as permanent. Sham Sundar. Freud says that anxiety develops when the superego represses the primitive desires of the ID to protect it, to protect the ego. Is such repression of basic instincts very healthy? Shla Prabhupada. Yes, for us repression is means restraining oneself from doing something which in the long run is against one's welfare. For example, suppose you are suffering from diabetes and the doctor says don't eat any sweet food. If you desire to eat sweets, you must repress that desire. Similarly, in our system of brahmacharya, there is also repression. A brahmachari should not sit down with a young woman or even see one. He may desire to see a young woman, but he must repress the desire. That is called tapasya or voluntary repression. Sham Sundar. But aren't these desires give outlet in other ways? For instance, instead of looking at a beautiful woman, we look at the beautiful form of Krishna. Shla Prabhupada. Yes, that is our process. Param drishtva nivartate. If you have a better engagement, you can give up an inferior engagement. When you are captivated by seeing the beautiful form of Krishna, naturally you will have no more desire to see the beautiful form of a young woman. Sham Sundar, what's the effect of childhood experiences on one's later development? Shla Prabhupada, children imitate whoever they associate with. You all know the movie Tarzan. He was brought up by the monkeys and he took on the habits of monkeys. If you keep children in good association, their physiological development will be very good. They will be like demigods. But if you keep them in bad association, they will turn out to be demons. Children are a blank slate. You can mold them as you like, and they are eager to learn. Sham Sundar. So a child's personality does not develop according to a fixed pattern. Shla Prabhupada. No. You can mold them in any way, like a soft dough. However you put them into mold, they will come out like Bharat, Bharat chapatis or kachoris, types of Indian pastries. Therefore, if you give child good association, they will develop nicely, and if you give them in bad association, they will develop poorly. They have no independent psychology. Sham Sundar. Actually, Freud had a rather pessimistic view of human nature. He believed that we are all beset with irrational and chaotic impulses that cannot be eliminated. Srila Prabhupada. This is not only pessimism but evidence of his poor fund of knowledge. He did not have perfect knowledge, nor was he trained by a perfect man. Therefore, his theories are all nonsense. He concluded that it was impossible to be happy in this material world, but that one can alleviate some of the conflicts through psychoanalysis. He thought one can try to make the path as smooth as possible, but it will always be troublesome. Srila Prabhupada. It is true that one cannot be happy in this material world, but if one becomes spiritually elevated, if his consciousness is changed to Krishna consciousness, then he will be happy. Okay. तो ये टॉपिक हमारा यहाँ पे कंप्लीट होता है. तो इससे पहले हमने मार्क्स की फिलॉसफी के ऊपर प्रभुपाद के व्यूज देखे थे, और उससे भी पहले प्लाटो के बिलीफ सिस्टम के बारे में हमने देखा था. तो ये अलग अलग फिलॉसफी के ऊपर प्रभुपाद के व्यूज हैं, जैसे कि चैप्टर में ही लिखा हुआ है पर्सपेक्टिव्स ऑन साइंस एंड फिलॉसफी. तो ये वाला जो टॉपिक है वो हम कल डिस्कस करेंगे. किसी का कोई प्रश्न है तो वो पूछ सकते हैं, अदरवाइज वी एंड द सेशन. ठीक है, तो एंड करते हैं. थैंक यू सो मच माता जी फॉर ज्वाइनिंग. वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः. हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे. श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय. हरे कृष्णा.